Today we're going to talk about irrigation methods and tools in a greenhouse setting for facilitating germination and development of young seedlings. And we're going to look at a variety of hand scale tools where you would actually be delivering the water by hand with a hose or perhaps even with a watering can. And then we will also go and take a look at essentially a semi-automated system that we have installed in our greenhouses here. And in each instance, do a little bit of compare and contrast and advantages and disadvantages of each system. So let's start with what I think is probably one of the most important and fundamental things. Over here, I've got one of the tools that I would use for watering by hand, and that's just a wand. This shaft is referred to as a wand, and then this is a water breaker, sometimes called a water breaker. And then there's also an on-off valve that allows me to precisely control and turn on and off kind of at a moment's notice. But what I wanted to especially have you notice is that this tool was hanging here up and off of the ground. It is really important with your watering devices, whatever devices you use, that you keep them up and off the ground. If you have a dirt floor or wood chipped or even gravel floored greenhouse or hoop house where you're growing your seedlings, that can absolutely be the place where pathogens start to accumulate. And then if your watering device is sitting on the ground, those pathogens could be on your watering tools and they could get spread onto your crops and maybe spread all over all of your crops if you're watering everybody all at once with a contaminated tool. In our case, we happen to have a concrete floor, but the same is really true here. It's a little bit less of a concern, less of a potential harbor for pathogens, but nonetheless, this is a space where diseases could be a problem. So I'm going to just make sure this is on and bring this around. And I just want to show you a little bit about how something like this works. There's a lot of different ways to think about watering. Fundamentally, though, I try to think about this watering as how many passes of water, how many times back and forth do I need to deliver water based on the temperature and sort of where we're at in the season, length of day, and so forth. Is it cloudy? Is it sunny? And then perhaps equally importantly is what is the size of the seedlings and what is the size of the container that they're in, because bigger seedlings need more water, but typically less frequently, and smaller, younger seedlings need water more frequently, but a smaller volume. When we have mature seedlings like this, I'm certainly going to be trying to water to the full depth of the container. So I'm going to take my water, turn it on away from the plant so that I can kind of adjust the flow and get the flow where I want, not have any huge droplets fall on my plants. And then I'm going to just go back and forth, back and forth. And for a mature seedling with our soil mix, I might need to go back and forth like that 6 or 8 times to really get water all the way down to the full depth of the plant. But back and forth is sort of a relative thing. If I go back and forth like that, that's a lot less water than if I go back and forth like that, both of which are just a single pass. So I wouldn't be too hung up on how many passes because it's going to be a little bit different depending on the way you pace yourself. But ultimately what I want to do when I'm delivering water for a mature plant is I want to be able to get water to the full depth of the cell. And if you have a well-rooted, well-anchored plant, once you've watered, if you wait a few minutes, you should be able to come back, pull up a seedling, and then take a look and see, do I have a nice dark color down the full depth of the cell? If I've only watered part way, maybe it's darker above where my finger is here, and then I can see a distinct color change and lighter soil deeper down because I didn't get water to the full depth. that is something I'm always going to want to be able to come back and check on as I'm assessing my delivery and how effective I was or was not in the process. So there's a variety of tools that you might use to do hand watering. This wand is one option. I have to turn this off for a sec. And let me show you a few others that we might think about. I always like, as I mentioned before, I always like having some sort of shut-off rather than having to go back and forth with at the faucet. I can basically control my flow and conserve water when I'm not actually delivering it with the tool that's in my hand. So this is a device, this particular one here is a device called the Wonder Waterer, and it similarly has a head at the top that disperses the flow, breaks up the flow, and it works kind of on the same principle. It's a little bit smaller flow, so for the width of these trays I might actually have to go back and forth for half the tray and back and forth for half the tray. What I like about this though, and you could probably see this in the flow, it's putting out a quite a bit gentler flow of water. If we take a look at the size of the holes here, really small size. This orange breaker here, this head, is another one that has real fine holes, small holes, and thus small droplet size, and that's going to be really gentle. Both of these, as long as you move carefully, are going to be really good for watering ungerminated seeds, ungerminated containers or trays, and then young seedlings, and even up to mature seedlings. If you take a look at this head in comparison, much larger holes. A tool like this I don't really think is suitable for watering ungerminated things. This is great if you're watering a lot of container plants like 1-gallon pots and so forth with more mature perennials. Allows you to put out a lot of water more quickly, but it's a little bit too heavy for ungerminated seed. But anyway, so there are two different options. Another option that we like is another option that we really like is this, what we call a rose on a hose. This brass rose here, this one's a little old and well worn, but this brass rose is the same brass rose that's on these watering cans, and we really like the way it puts out water. And it's convenient because you can go back and forth and water an entire greenhouse off of the hose as opposed to having to fill and refill a can. The other thing I really like in this particular setting is this brass on and off valve. These are a little bit expensive, but this brass on and off valve allows me for really nice, precise finger control. So that's another way to look at it. Unfortunately, the connector parts, there's one key part right here. It's got solid plastic that slips into this, and then this little quick release fitting for the Gardena part here. Really convenient, but that in-between piece is not actually readily available. So because we can't get those anymore, we've somewhat moved on from this system, even though it's a system that I really like. To give you a little bit of a sense of some other options here, I guess the last thing I'd like to show you is this Foggit nozzle and another version of a shut-off. Kind of quick release shut-off here, which I like, but this tool, this is called a Foggit nozzle. They come in a couple of different diameter holes. This one happens to put out 2 gallons per minute if you have it on full flow. And we like it, especially if I was watering ungerminated, really small, really fine seeds. And they say something like snapdragons or feverfew, really small seeds that are typically sown and left right on the surface or barely covered. When I come through with some of these other watering devices, I may end up doing one of two things, either burying the seeds too deep in the soil or even washing them out and up and off the surface. But with this tool here, I have a really fine, gentle mist. So I just have to go over my trays and back and forth. Obviously, I'm not putting out nearly as much water, but I'm putting out the water much, much more gently to help facilitate germination by keeping the seeds in the right place, in the place where I put them in the first place. And then the last thing I just want to show you of some of these hand tools is the watering can. So there's many, many different watering cans out there. We have been using these for a long time. It's a brand called Hawes. Like them a lot because I can tip it, go back and forth, and pretty precisely water my seedlings. This is especially convenient if, like, I've got something way in the back of the greenhouse and I just need to do a little spot watering or touch-up watering. Rather than dragging the whole hose back and forth, maybe I just carry the can down to the far end to do some touch-up work. In thinking about all of these hand tools, the big advantage is low cost, very, very little capital investment in having these kinds of tools. And on a bench that's got a lot of mixed material, different plants at different life stages and so forth, I can use my skill as a waterer to deliver more water and less water on the same bench to meet the needs of the individual plants. Trade-offs, though, are that it takes me a lot of time and labor. I've got to be able to do this. I've got to be present. I can't be out in the field preparing the ground on a hot sunny day, or if I am, I've got to be aware, oh, I've got seedlings in the greenhouse, and at one to several junctions per day, I'm going to need to come back and water my seedlings. And actually hand watering is going to take me quite a bit of time, especially if I've got a full house. This house is about an 800 square foot house. If I needed to water everything in here, if it was full, it could take me half hour, 45 minutes easily to do it by hand. And if I have to do that more than once a day, a lot of my day is being absorbed by hand watering. Another thing to consider is that with a system that's based entirely on watering by hand, you're needing to have somebody present every single day that you have crops in the greenhouse. You can't really walk away and take a vacation because young seedlings in the greenhouse are not taking a vacation. So you need to be able to be there and meet their needs. Another thing to just think about is while you can be very precise with your water delivery, it definitely takes some time and effort to sort of build the skill and knowledge to meet plants' needs in a timely manner and to deliver it as evenly and consistently as possible across individual groups or blocks of plants. That said, cost is low, but it is a knowledge-intensive sort of thing. And then there is the labor-intensive aspect to consider. All right, so now we just want to show you another tool that is potentially something worth considering. Not exactly automation, but something to simplify. This is called the high hose system, and they come in a variety of length cables and hoses depending on the length of the structure you're working with. The one thing you need to know is you'll need to have some solid points of attachment on either end of your greenhouse to attach this cable to, that is sort of the core of how this system works. What we really like about this system, though, is once you have it set up, you are able to bring your hose back and forth the full length of the house and keep it up and off of the ground the whole time. Again, helping with sanitation and helping with ease of movement around the greenhouse. But just take a look at how I can operate this, run my hose, and I can be walking the full length of the structure, watering the whole time, and my hose is above my crops the whole time. And then when I want to go back in the other direction, I'm still watering, I'm still able to move back and forth with the materials. All of my infrastructure is above my crop. So I'll just do I've got a little bit of watering to do right here. So I can come back and forth here, water a couple different times, but my hose is always up and away from my plants. and allows me to move easily back and forth without dragging hoses on things, without having hoses catch on my tables. A lot of times if your hose is on the ground, your hose is going to want to catch and snag on your legs, and that can cause some disruption. But with this system, I'm able to move pretty fluidly back and forth. And it's a fairly inexpensive solution to this challenge. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the advantages of having an automated or semi-automated system. A couple of seasons ago, we installed what I will call a semi-automated system. We basically have a controller that we are able to program in different programs for each of the benches or each of the tables, and then we can also alternate programs for what are essentially more sunny, warmer weather conditions, and then we can flip the switch or change the program so that we water on a different pattern when we have cool, overcast conditions where we perhaps need considerably less water or less repetition of water over the course of the days if we're going to have consistently cool conditions. There's essentially three main components to this. There's the brains of the system, the controller itself. This happens to be the Toro Evolution controller that is an expandable controller so that I can add more and more stations. And then there are the solenoid valves that actually run each individual station or bench. In this case, we have three separate stations, three solenoid valves. And then finally, there's the emitters where the water is coming out. And there's a variety of ways that you could go about doing this. We have them hanging from above because then there's no obstruction on the table. But there are some challenges or some things to be aware of as well. There's water in this tube suspended, and we have a little thing called a check valve here so that when the pressure, when the water is not on and there's no pressure pushing the water through, it should prevent it from dripping and creating individual wet spots. But you'll see, like this one here, is dripping just a tiny bit, and over time that can create a wet spot. So this is an example of a check valve that I'm actually probably going to need to see if I can tinker with, and if not, just replace that check valve so that I don't have a continuous wet spot here. But those are the three components: the controller that is programmable to meet your needs, the solenoid valves that are actually geared towards each station. The signal, the controller sends a signal to that valve, an electrical impulse that causes the valve to open, and then another electrical impulse when the cycle is over to cause the valve to close. And then finally you have the output. And we will go into the next greenhouse to take a quick look at how what the water droplets actually look like. So I just wanted to share a couple things about features of this system, things that we like, and then some challenges or concerns as well. One challenge or concern I mentioned is just that if your check valves fail, then you have drip spots and you will have excessively wet points on your bench. That's not optimal. But the things that we do really like is if we turn this on, take a look at this. When we turn this on, you're going to see that it's a very, very fine mist. It's a little bit hard to see probably through the camera, but these nozzles are such that the droplet size that comes out is very, very fine. That's really nice and gentle on your soil surface when you are actually watering young ungerminated seeds. You're not going to have any of the issues that I mentioned that could happen with larger droplet size, where seeds may get excessively buried or even washed out of the soil. With this gentle mist, that won't take place. And as long as you run it long enough, you get good penetration down through the canopy with a more mature plant, so that you're getting water to the full depth of the container. The other thing about this that is really nice is that with my programmer controlled, the system comes on automatically. I can be out in the field doing other work and be confident that all of my plants are being well watered. I do always have to be aware, and this would be true with hand watering as well, but I have to be aware of kind of my corners and edges. On a hot sunny day, this southern edge of the tray is going to dry much, much faster. This is south facing here. This edge is going to dry much faster than everywhere else. And both by hand and in this case, I may need to come back and do a little bit of hand watering or spot watering to address the fact that that's a little bit of a drier microclimate right there. Another thing about this, the time savings factor is I have to invest some time in programming the controller, and there's a little bit of a learning curve to figure out with my soil mix and with my crops and season, how long do I need to run the cycle for. But once I've figured that out, if I block and organize all of my ungerminated things together, I'm able to water them all at once with the controller without having to come and do that work. And then similarly, if I block and organize my plants that are in a mid stage of development or nearing maturity, if they're all blocked and organized together on the same bench, on the same valve, I can water them all very consistently and really facilitate uniform, even growth. And that's really advantageous. A disadvantage, however, is I can't water effectively and have highly mixed crops on the bench. Mixed species, yes, but mixed stages of development, I'm not going to be able to water frequently and shallowly for ungerminated things, and at the same time water less frequently and to the full depth of the container for mature plants. So I have to block and organize based on sort of the parameters of what is and isn't possible with my delivery system. That's one thing to consider. Another thing I wanted to just point out, if you look in this, this is a 40-foot long house, and at 3 junctures through this house, we've got shutoff valves so that we can basically divide the bench into quarters, so that if I've only got a small amount of plants, I'm not watering the entire bench. I can just water the section where there are plants. And then as I am sowing and growing more plants, I would come and open that valve and close this one so that I'm watering up to this point. And then as I get more plants, I would back down and be able to water as many plants as I needed to. So that's definitely a nice thing in terms of thinking about water conservation and not putting water where you don't need it. A system like this, that's about a 600 square foot greenhouse, and this is an 800 square foot greenhouse. So 1,400 square foot between the two of them. All of the parts and materials was about $1,200 for all of the valves, PVC, the controller, the conduit, electrical wire, and so forth. And then our labor to install it, which, if you were paying an outside contractor, that's going to cost you quite a bit more money. However, I would argue that the time and energy that you save in actually having to water everything by hand day in and day out will be very, very quickly returned to you by virtue of the fact that your time is now freed up to be working on other things. And I think that you'll also find something really valuable. Historically, we've had to have somebody present to water all the time, even on the weekends when we were doing everything by hand. But with this semi-automated system, we're able to essentially walk away from the greenhouses on the weekend, as long as it's not real extreme weather conditions, where we might worry about excess dry down and so forth. And we are having really good results and lots of energy on our part, individual and people power saved. So consider, depending on your size and scale, is a semi-automated system like this something that could be of great benefit for you? And my guess is that the answer is probably yes. And there's a lot of variations on what's possible. So a semi-automated system like this has a lot of advantages and a few challenges or disadvantages, as we've talked about, and a moderate cost for this 1,400 square feet of greenhouse. cost us about $1,200 plus our labor. If I wanted to have a fully controlled system, a fully automated system where I have environmental sensors monitoring temperature, humidity, with soil probes to know where soil moisture is at, I could be spending many, many thousands of dollars, and the system would be that much more refined and precise, and perhaps your scale and the nature of the crops that you're growing actually would really benefit from that, but it is a much, much bigger capital investment. And we've found that this sort of middle ground really saves us a tremendous amount of labor and is giving us great results in terms of plant health and plant performance.